Josh Green.
Okay. Quick conversation here today. Very good news. So thank you, everyone, for your hard work over the last several days. As you know, we have been postured for this tropical storm, which was Tropical Storm Calvin, and its impacts. We have not had, for approximately 5 years, landfall in Hawaii of a tropical storm or a hurricane. The last, I believe, was Olivia in 2018. But as we also know, tropical storms have consequences. They have a broad impact. And to be very frank, we take these things seriously because they can cause harm very quickly. We never know exactly how they're going to move, especially in the end game. So I'm very proud of our team. We were enabling our team to respond rapidly, and so we issued emergency rules or emergency proclamation briefly to allow for disaster response for our professionals to access the state's major disaster fund. It invokes certain laws necessary for emergency management. It helps us to basically respond, and I'll let General Hara add to that if he needs. As you know, these storms, when they are superstorms or hurricanes, they can do what happened recently in Guam. And Guam suffered greatly when they had a direct hit from MOWAR. That was MOWAR. Thankfully, Tropical Storm Calvin did not cause significant impact within our state. In a moment, John will give you an update exactly where we are with the status of this storm. It is safe to say that the worst is past now as far as the storm goes, but we will still ask for care, especially today. Finally, hurricane season is long. We are just in the second month. It runs through the end of November. This is only, like I said, month 2. So this was a good reminder. If we'd had a direct hit, it would have been necessary to have 2 weeks of water, 2 weeks of food, 2 weeks of medication to be ready. So we're grateful to have had this first run of the hurricane season in a safe, controlled way. I'm going to give some additional thanks to Mayor Roth. All the mayors were terrific. Mayor Roth had to deal with the brunt of the winds and the rain here in this storm. They did a very good job. These are stressful events. We acknowledge that, but we want to keep people very well informed, and we'll continue to do that. But at this point, I want to say we're relieved that the storm did not cause significant damage at this point, and our experts will give you more information.
Mahalo, Governor. At this time, I'd like to turn your attention to Hawaii County Mayor Mitch Roth joining us virtually.
Aloha. As Mayor of the County of Hawaii, I'm pleased to report that there were no major incidents reported and only minor flooding in typically flood-prone areas that occurred throughout the evening and into this morning. There were reports of fallen tree branches and heavy winds in various areas island-wide, but no major damages have been reported. We said from the beginning of this that we were preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, and we're fortunate that through a combination of preparedness and happenstance, we're able to weather this storm and mitigate its impacts. In response to the storm, though, we have implemented facility and service closures across the county to ensure public safety. This includes offices, permit inspections, parks and recreation facilities, and other forward-facing services such as transfer stations and transportations. They'll remain closed throughout the day and will reopen tomorrow. We appreciate everyone's understanding during these closures. Due to the flash flooding caused by Tropical Storm Calvin, certain roads, including Paula Transfer Station Road and Wood Valley Road, remain closed at this time. We also closed the Waipio Valley Road as we knew that it would be kind of dangerous having just done some work there. Lastly, I want to extend my gratitude to everyone here. We had a great team starting off with our community, our federal, our state, and local partners. As the governor said, this is the first, and being prepared was really important, and that preparation, especially with the partners that appeared in civil defense, that didn't start just yesterday. They've been working on this for several weeks. So thank you so much, and glad that we're able to be here safe and sound.
Mahalo, Mayor. At this time, I would like to introduce John Bravender, NOAA Warning Coordination Meteorologist.
Great. Thank you. I had the pleasure of coming up here and talking about post-tropical cyclone Kelvin. Kelvin passed south of the Big Island last night as a tropical storm, and during the overnight hours and this morning, lost all of its deep thunderstorms that helped define a tropical cyclone. It's moving westward. Right now it's about 250 miles south of Oahu, moving west at 20 miles an hour. And what we mean by post-tropical is it no longer has those tropical storm characteristics, but it still has a lot of wind with it, a lot of potential. It's a gale low. We'll still have another 12 to 24 hours of strong winds. So any mariners heading back out to sea, keep that in mind as you're on the high seas. For those in the States, for the rest of the day, we have a wind advisory for all the islands and a flood watch. As we've talked about already, conditions are improving, but we could still see wind gusts, some tree branches down, heavy rains. And as some roads are still closed, keep in mind, if you see water over a roadway, don't drive through it. Avoid any sort of flooded roadways. And if you see any tree limbs, power lines down, always avoid those too.
Mahalo, John. Next, I would like to invite up Major General Ken Hara, Hawaii State Adjutant General.
Good morning and aloha. As Governor Green mentioned, it's imperative that emergency management agencies are postured for rapid response. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Haima Administrator James Barros for leading the planning and coordination effort throughout the state. That's with our federal, state, county, and non-governmental postures. It's his leadership that ensured that we're ready and postured for rapid response. So thank you, James, for that. I also want to thank all of the state, county, and local agencies that helped us and mobilized in support of the state. Especially the Hawaii National Guard, is really challenging for us and for our planners because over 1,700 soldiers and a handful of airmen are currently deployed to Fort Johnson, Louisiana, participating in the 29th Infantry Brigade Combat Team's Joint Readiness Training Center rotation. So that really took away a lot of our resources and capacity. But the planners are ready. We had plans available, ready to execute to be able to get soldiers and airmen to Hawaii Island if they needed that support. So thanks to the National Guard. Lastly, the last I want to thank is obviously the media for helping us to provide that information to the public, and then lastly the public for being resilient, being ready should a disaster had hit. So thank you again. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Major General Hara. At this time, and finally, I'd like to bring up James Barros, Administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
Aloha. I'd like to take this time to thank everybody that's part of our emergency management enterprise, from the county folks that stepped up and were prepared early on, to our federal folks that stepped in, the teams from FEMA, National Weather Service, our military partners. The Title 10 folks came in and they were ready to support. Corps of Engineers. It's very comforting to see our federal partners step up, join us at the state EOC, and come with their resources ready to support the state. The team up at Haima and our state partners from across the departments in the state, everyone stepped up got ready, and thank goodness we didn't have to exercise any of our plans. But it was a good test for the state EOC, and build that fabric with our state partners, our federal partners, and our counties, and also Red Cross and the volunteer organizations that are out there. When we look at it, it's going to be in the response phase. It's going to be a whole of community that's going to get us through. Good dry run. Thank you.
Mahalo, Administrator Barros. At this time, I'd like to call the governor back up as we will take questions live from the media. And we will start first with Mark from Hawaii News Now.
Governor, looking at this event, what kind of lessons do you feel this reinforces about the importance of quick mobilization and readiness?
Early preparation is everything. It decreases anxiety amongst all of the responding agencies. Having frequent communication makes a big difference. And also, it reminds our people that sooner or later we will have a large storm that makes a turn and hits us. So we will have these conversations probably at some point where we're talking about major damage, the need to bring in federal support, and how to handle those who are stranded. So I think, like James said, it was nice to have a dry run. Though it was a bit damp in many parts of the Big Island, it proved to be pretty dry for us statewide. We are a new administration, although our team, of course, was able to be in support in the previous 4 years, but there's nothing like seeing it firsthand. And honestly, that storm, it looked like it was very likely going to, at one point, come right through Oahu. So we would have had some probably loss of power and some other challenges with our infrastructure.
Any follow-up?
You have
Our next question comes from Matt with KHLN2.
Thank you. Governor.
You too.
Pose a question to John.
Come down. Yes. And if I may, before John gets here, come up, John. You know, he was very good. John was ready to go at, in the 4 a.m. hour, was texting and calling us and giving us real-time feedback, even outside of the, the 8, 12, and 24-hour cycles. That's very reassuring to an administration getting its feet wet.
I'm just curious, from your expertise, are there any changes that you're tracking in the environment and climate that gives you a reason to believe that we will see more of these types of events, hurricanes and tropical storms, come to the island?
There's a couple things to talk about with that. One, as we're at the start of hurricane season, we're heading into it. This is the peak for the Central Pacific is August into September. So Calvin was a early season for us, and that kind of worked to our benefit with the water temperatures still on the cool side. That's what led to some of that weakening that we saw east of the state. With warmer oceans, then you have more energy and more heat and more energy to allow tropical storms and hurricanes to get stronger. So that's the concern going into the future. Warmer waters could mean more intense hurricanes, more threats to us at the higher latitude where we are. But bringing it back to a more preparedness message too, keep in mind that we're going into the peak of hurricane season still. So we've had our dry run, and use this as a chance to think about what you'll do if this, instead of a tropical storm, were a hurricane. If it didn't pass south of us, if it passed over us, how would you react? And be prepared for that as we get into what could be a near to above normal hurricane season.
John, if you can remain up there, we have a follow-up question from Mark with Hawaii News Now.
Hey, John, thank you very much. Just looking at the previous models, what was the probability that Calvin was going to take the path that it eventually landed on? Because at some times it did look like it was going to be a direct hit, so I'm just kind of wondering how close of a call was it?
So actually, Calvin was a good kickoff tropical storm, I suppose. The path changed. It was originally going right over the islands and then shifted southward, but was otherwise pretty consistent. It wasn't turning. It wasn't recurving like Lane did in 2018. It was keeping a somewhat direct path. And those small adjustments that we're making over the course of the day, cycle to cycle, allows us to adjust. It's not any big swings. And it was probably also the weakening aspect of it too, being steered more by the low-level trade winds as it got weaker, as it wasn't as tall, that ended up shifting it on that more southerly track.
John, another follow-up from Max with page 1.
I just want to follow up on, if I heard correctly, are you expecting an above normal hurricane season?
Yeah, for the season outlook that we released in May from the Climate Prediction Center, called for there's a 50% chance of an active year for us in the Central Pacific. An average year for us is 4 to 5 tropical cyclones. We're calling for this year 4 to 7, so near to above normal. So that Calvin could be the first of what could be a busier season after we've had 3 very quiet years.
Governor, our next question comes from Robert with KITV4.
You were talking a little bit about everything, how it sounds like it went pretty seamless. For this being the first time your administration went through it,
Yes.
personally, even, could you just kind of give us the inside baseball and what went well, what maybe, maybe you held your breath, you were hoping something else didn't happen, just how did everything come together, any surprises?
Sure. Very few surprises. This is a veteran team. As you know, Adjutant General Har has been with us for a great stretch of time, has done this many times as he's had a comprehensive team ready to go. We didn't have any major glitches, honestly. Some of it is, when you talk about inside baseball, very mundane. Having, this will probably bore people to death, but having the links up so that we are communicating on time. We started every meeting literally to the minute that was expected. We didn't wait 20 minutes. We didn't wait 45 minutes. We didn't have people lingering on calls. We had people doing their work. That was very good. That's a good sign. It bodes well for us. We also are testing some of our technology when this goes on. That's also important. We have a commitment, actually, here in our administration to be more supportive of HIEMA going forward. They have some infrastructure needs that we'd like to support them on. So they're going through these processes, too, as they go to the EOC, that they have these calls. That was good. There are some other interesting twists in this particular circumstance. For example, the Secretary of the Navy was here visiting on the day that we were experiencing the height of the storm. And I was lucky enough to meet him, and we had a call with the head of FEMA. Those are additional benefits to go through this process and to talk to some of our national leaders. But overall, very seamless. The mayor has incredible people around him and has a lot of experience too. Also, Lieutenant Governor, this was her first experience, so she was able to join in and be a part like I was over the last 4 years. That's very important because we will tag team responsibilities at different times. Sooner or later, we are going to have a storm where there's 3, 4, 5 days of heavy-duty weather, and we will want to be capable of having multiple shifts and handle the needs of our state. So all of this is training, although there was some concern. You know, the rains that did come ultimately hit my old hometown quite hard, down in the southern part of the Big Island. I remember periods where we had multiple weeks of rain, and that affects them. One road goes out, takes a lot of time to get it back up. You heard up in Wood Valley, I believe. It's pretty remote, and so we feel lucky that we didn't have to deploy a lot of extra service, but we were able to also have those other side calls. We were talking to HECO, we're talking to the first responders, making sure that if something happens, we're ready. And then finally, we wanted to train ourselves up on the cadence of when we would consider closures. And I think we can continue to improve on that. We didn't have to close very much this time, but that's a pretty complicated process when you have thousands and thousands of people either standing down from work or staying home. So I got to ask a lot of good questions. I was appreciative of the team. I was asking some basic questions like where are the facilities that people are going to safely hide from a storm. That was important to me. So I'm just grateful that, number one, it wasn't a big storm, and two, that our team was already ready to go.
Robert, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, it would probably go to Major General Har. You were speaking to
Right, sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, over 1,700 soldiers are currently deployed to Fort Johnson, Louisiana, as part of that GRTC rotation, the Joint Readiness Training Center. I was extremely concerned. And one lesson learned for me is I probably, if we had the opportunity, and maybe even with the authorities of the governor, having a conversation with the Army and the National Guard Bureau to consider allowing the 29th Brigade to do the rotation, but not during hurricane season. So that's a lesson learned for me. The same thing was true in 2018. We had those, the major flooding on the island of Kauai. Our CH-47 medium lift helicopters, the ones with the two rotors, significant capability for the state. They're deployed overseas for a wartime mission, but at the same time, the 25th Infantry Division active duty CH-47, same type of helicopter, were deployed. So that significantly reduced our ability to even rely on the active duty forces for airlift support. So we have to use multiple UH-60 Blackhawks as opposed to just one CH-47. So that's some of the lessons learned. And then the unit that's deployed to GRTC now, they get back on the first week of August.
Somewhat hypothetical then, since nothing happened, that you need to respond to, but with 1,700 members of your force out, at what point did you have a sense of, like, if this much happens, you're going to need to call for backups, for more response from somewhere else? Is there any, can you walk us through?
Right, so we had multiple contingencies. Obviously, the first would go to National Guard units and capabilities from the other islands, shifting them to the islands that would be impacted was the first option. Second, with Hawaii being isolated and the tyranny of time and distance, we'd rely more on requesting for active duty support, so submitting a request for assistance through FEMA, through the Defense Coordinating Office, and then anticipating support more than likely from U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. And then the third option is an Emergency Management Assistance Compact, where we could go back to the other states and territories for support. So we had multiple contingencies in place. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So again, as we've gone through this process, we feel grateful that we didn't have any loss of life or limb. That's what's most important to us here in the state, that we look out for people's well-being. But stay tuned, because we have several months left in the hurricane season, and we view this as an opportunity to have gotten ready. So it was very good. So I think people be a little careful today. As you heard from John, there still could be heavy winds, there could be heavy rain, but as the storm passes, we should be in the clear, and we'll be able to close the book on Tropical Storm Calvin. Thank you, everyone.